Foundation and
It finally moved. Of course, it's still boring.
Talk about what we. It's bizarre. Why did that get really? Why did it got really dark in there? Like. Okay. Good evening, folks. I think we're actually live, though. My cue, the light. Anybody want to venture a guess to say whether or not we're live? I think we are on air. We're going to start off tonight, then, as we are on air. Hopefully, we are, with a workshop. And leading off is our community art discussion with Sabrina Best and Becky Conrad, and they're going to update us on our public art work group. So,
there you go.
you ready?
I was like, where'd I go?
There you go. It's all yours.
right.
Thank you.
We could go back and forth. Okay, so we're here just to provide a quick update on where we are at with the public art process and projects. Just a quick recap of where a lot of this kind of started. Becky, this is probably more of your slide, actually.
Okay. Well, you know, this is a moment in time. It's not necessarily the beginning, because this grant we got in January 2019 when I was still at the Chamber with LA Arts is really the culmination of a lot of work that the community has been doing for a long time. Both cities focusing certainly on downtown redevelopment, community pedestrian accessibility, all the things that make a community very livable, focusing on the river. And so it was very timely for the Chamber to partner with LA Arts around a grant that is focused on economic development and the arts. And this one specifically worked out of the LA Arts cultural plan and the particular part of the plan that talked about tourism and economic development. And we used public art as a focus, and we were awarded the $75,000 Creative Communities Equal Economic Development Phase 2 grant that included a process to create a public art committee that both city councils adopted in December of 19, and then also a piece to be installed in each community. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. But we created a public art work group, and of course you adopted the public art plan back at the very beginning of the process.
So we'll just go through quickly the current approved projects that are in the works and coming up. So the first one we have is The Fish. And this will be located in Anniversary Park. Installation should hopefully happen sometime this week. So this will be the first of all the current projects going on that we'll have be able to install. We are looking at or aiming to do the unveiling ceremony on Friday, July 30th, which will be during the Friday Art Walk with LA Arts and stuff. So this will be exciting to get things kind of going and rolling and talking about public art and all those installations.
Particularly proud of the piece that you just saw with the fish, Thomas Berger. We did a statewide call. The two funded projects out of the grant were restricted to Maine artists for a number of reasons, because one of the things we want to do is be part of the arts landscape across the entire state. And so we did put the call out just for Maine artists, and Thomas was one of the finalists for our project, but Bud Form here by Hugh Lassen, who's out of Cherryfield, was the one that was actually selected by the committee. But the excitement around Thomas Berger's work led the City of Auburn, thank you very much for your own investment in bringing his project to the community as well. So we'll be having Thomas Berger's Fish, and very soon after that, Hugh Lassen's Bud Form, which is a large piece of black granite, as you can see. And this is being installed at the head of the Great Falls Plaza. Great visibility. I think I did a shout out to Public Works the last time I was here, but thank you very much to them for looking at the site with the artist in a cold, snowy winter day and figuring out how to make visibility very clear from both sides of the river. So that's coming along. It's done. We're waiting for cranes to be able to put it in place.
And then the last time we were here, this was the piece that we were talking about. This was a private donor, and the artist was Charlie Hewitt, who's an Auburn native. And this illuminated LED art piece will be going in Anniversary Park as well. We're still working on some final timelines for this, but still aimed for the fall of 2021. And then wanted to just put out there some of the things that have been discussed. There has been no approval or official proposals on these items, but these are the ones that are kind of in queue being talked about. Talked about updating that art wall in the New Auburn area. We do have funding in this year's CIP for art projects, and whether that's leveraged for a matching grant or used in one project or multiple projects, that's something that will need to be discussed and kind of decided on for some direction at some point. But going through and trying to find a way to update this, those artwork been up there for quite a while, I think about 15 years, 10 to 15 years.
Same pieces?
Same pieces,
Yes.
They have not been swapped out. So whether we do the same style, we switch to a mural, we do a little combo of both, anything's kind of on the table to discuss. But that is one area that I think we've identified in town that needs to just kind of get freshened up. And then also, a little while ago, we talked about the potential concepts for the redesign for Festival Plaza. All of them included public art. So again, that's something that this committee would also help kind of steer and talk about, whether it's a mural, if it's something on the stairs, on the wall, some type of component. But public art was definitely an element that we wanted to include in. They were in all three concepts, and therefore will, in some way, shape, or form, be in that final vision. Do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So, a grant is a great opportunity because there are a lot of measurables and deliverables in a grant. You have to do a report, so you keep copious notes probably if you've all run grants in the past. But one of the things we realized was public art ideas come at you fast and furious when you open the floodgates, and there's really no comprehensive way to, currently there had been no comprehensive way to corral all of those ideas. So we've put together, we've done some research across the country, we've put together kind of a best practice proposal form that's downloadable, and it's a Google spreadsheet, so the materials flow right, the information flows right into a database where you can sort and keep things. And this would be something we propose that both cities start to use, so you can inventory the requests and not maybe take them in such an ad hoc manner as we have been, even though that's been terrific. Ultimately, this could become something that really needs a management structure. So to start capturing the data would be the purpose of this form. It's a Google Doc. It's very easy to use. I'll keep going if
Yeah.
you want. So the plan, as I mentioned earlier, the grant called for the creation of a committee to oversee the grant, and both mayors, Mayor Levesque was the mayor at the time, and a different mayor in Lewiston at the time, appointed a committee. And there has been the notion that's a work group, and that it would probably end with the end of the grant. And also, the plan that was adopted by both cities called for an oversight committee. And we realized that while it was wonderful that the plan got adopted so quickly, we've learned a lot about the process. So we'd like to revisit both the process and the plan, the plan we have, and any current changes to the plan would include how you would put this work group together in the future. Would it be a work group? Would it be a committee? Would it be joint? Would there be two? So we'd like to talk about all of that going forward. But the thing we really want to focus on tonight is not just the grant, and that's why I said what I said at the beginning. Festival Plaza is public art, and I think we all know that. And Auburn has invested in public art for a long time. But the opportunity to do this is ripe, and we'd like to make sure it aligns with other city priorities and not have it be seen as a kind of ad hoc or random process. So that is why we're here tonight, both to give you an update and let you ask some questions. It's been a fun process. I certainly can tell you I've learned a lot more about cranes in the last 3 weeks than I ever knew I'd have to know. Regarding the arts, how heavy is Hugh Lassen's piece?
4,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Bud form? Yeah.
The fish.
Oh, the fish, that Thomas Berger's.
Oh,
Yeah,
the
the
fish.
fish is
And
4,000,
I think Bud
and
forms-
Bud was,
More.
yeah.
The only thing you need to know is Dan Cody's phone number.
That's right, and we do,
That's right.
and his email, and he's answering his emails in Florida, we're so excited. So there is a desire, and I know you've been updated on this as well, but to let the grant complete, which it actually has formally completed with the commission, but we have another 6 months in our minds of work to do getting these two pieces installed. But LA Arts would like to provide some oversight of a kind of continuation of the plan, a continuation of the process, and work with both cities to determine the best route forward. And that would include, in my mind, and I'm only speaking personally now, but to really think about public art as you think about how you do public landscaping, how we create parks and pocket parks, how planning talks about, its vision for the built landscape in our community. Public art really, I mean, there can be visual presentations, temporary installations, but in general, public art has some permanence to it, and it really, it wants to fit the community in which it resides. And so the desire of LA Arts is to have the council give some direction to move forward with a task of working with both cities, with the staffs, to think about how public works, who are absolutely integral to this, both from the installation to the maintenance, but get them involved in the front end of the process. So the committee might look different going forward. How it does integrate with planning, with zoning, with ordinances, with safety. Is it obstructive? Is it even visually obstructive? Will it stop traffic in the middle of a busy roadway? All those things other communities have talked about and looked at in their more comprehensive either plans or policies. So that's the work LA Arts is proposing to do, and to bring back recommendations across the fall that council and workshop can start to work through and really be much more part of than you were in the first iteration. I think we'd like to have a discussion and answer questions.
Let me, if I could just, I remember when we formed this group, I think it was like 2 months into my first term. So it was very quick, and you were at the chamber at the time, and I do remember us talking about this in depth. And there's a couple things during the grant approval process of the state was, what body that was there. You guys, great job. Everybody, city staff, both sides of the river, all the volunteers, phenomenal, couldn't ask for any better. There was one thing, though, that was talked about during the grant approval process that we might need to follow up on, and the state liked this, and because of time and COVID and what happened, it stopped, was the incorporation of art policy within our comprehensive plan. If you remember that conversation, Becky, correct me if I
No,
go
you're
off
right.
memory and I'm wrong. But the implementation, or at least the start of the conversation about how art is part of the plan, how does it fit in, how does it encouraged? For example, I think with all new school designs, there's a 3% allocation towards art, 1%? 1% of the total budget
The
is
large
art.
budget for this next
So we're
project.
$1.15 million for art. I don't know where that stands. Is there a separate art committee within the high school building committee? Tim, do you know of?
No, there isn't yet. They have to get the building erected first, and then we're going to talk about the art stuff. There is a cap, too. It's 1% up to, no, there is a cap.
There's a
I did
cap.
already ask about it if we could use it to match or add funds to it, so they're looking into that to see if we can leverage that money to get more art than just one art piece at the school to meet the,
Yeah.
the minimum, so we can do more.
That's a great example of a community being proactive, because the committee will be designated by the state, by the Arts Commission, but you want local representation as much as possible. It wouldn't be out-of-town people that would determine things, but you want the right people on the committee from in town to really be part of the conversation, because those pieces are meant to instill a lot in a school. I mean, they're not just meant to be something to look at. They're really meant to be either talk about your history or talk about your future or talk about something. You can really put a lot of work into those calls for art.
So you don't have a plan yet what this work group or committee or joint committee would look like, but there's going to be some ongoing conversations on that
Yes.
on your end? Council, do you have any comments about the organization? I know this council has been a big proponent of consolidating subgroups, work committees on other types of committees in the past. Is that some of the messaging that you want to give forth to Becky and Sabrina as they ponder different makeups of this?
No.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it should be under Parks and Rec, because a lot of that is having Parks and Rec involved and having I'm gonna say plant operations, but that's not who it is, maintenance. Being involved in that at the beginning, I think is a good place. I know we're trying to we're trying to lessen the amount of committees we have, and I think that starts at the staff level and then works its way here, versus the other way around.
So having, let's say Parks and Rec, just a Parks and Rec committee appoints 1 or 2 people that are on this joint committee, let's say.
Yeah.
And that way, let's say it's Sean Rice, or he's the school department, but let's say it's whomever it is from Auburn, is actually a member of the Parks and Rec committee, but also a subcommittee member of that. So that's an idea. Belinda, you had your hand up?
I've talked with several residents. They would like to see more input by Auburn residents on what type of art comes into Auburn. They love the pictures on the painted wall, for lack of a formal title of it. But, and the pictures are really pretty, but there's nobody from Auburn on here. So we would like to see more work, more art pieces featured by those that can paint or sculpt or do whatever form of art from Auburn residents.
Those are the things of policy, and I think you might want to, as the recommendations come forward, debate plan or policy in terms of how sustainability around thinking moves forward. Policy just, in most communities, seems to have more longevity around the time that went into creating it, and therefore the way it lives on. And there are lots of good examples to share, and I think one that's been circulated is Salem, Massachusetts, but many, Councilor Gary, do have very specific sets of, almost a matrix that certain sections of the community need to be designated to have youth involved, or certain, areas need to be temporary, or certain, and those are all things that need to be very reflective of the community. I don't think this particular, the mayor does remember the initial conversations, and the whole application was around the gateways, which is actually terrific that Bud Form is at a gateway as a result. While it wasn't necessarily maybe where it was originally going to be, I think it's turning out to be quite a good location for it. And it would drive tourism, so some of you, I think, are aware that the Bates College interns have created a public art map that's interactive, it's online. The Chamber has just published their new Discovery Guide. It has a 2-page spread on public art. So we want people to come here and both feel they're visiting someplace special, and that they may want to live here, and that their kids or their own talents could find a place in this. So I absolutely agree.
Well, originally, the pictured wall was a painted wall, and we had all ages, from kids to adults, painting some sort of part of the mural. And it lasted for many years till it started chipping and falling apart. In fact, I think it was done twice.
I'm going to look at Councilor Boss and Councilor McLeod a little bit on this one. Could, because the 3 of us are on the comp plan review committee, possibly work with Becky, Sabrina, and Eric and so forth in crafting some of this overarching art language for the comp plan review that we can actually slide in for council and PB approval. I don't know where it would sit. I don't know what it would look like. I don't know how prescriptive or non it would be. Or it could be broad in term, but I do want to make sure that we have something there that hopefully gets approved by the council that we can look at if we ever go for any more competitive type grants, to really show that it's in the comprehensive plan. It's part of our ethos. So something we can.
Yeah, that would be great, and I'd love to see some best practice language from other communities and what they have embedded in their comprehensive plans.
Councilor Walker?
Yeah, just one part. I would like whatever is picked and chosen for art to be used in our city, that it comes to the council before someone makes a determination that this is what we want here or there or whatever.
Council has final approval on all art in public land and right-of-ways.
Yeah, but I don't want to wait until after you've had 100 people approve something, and the 7 of us decide it's not what we want. So I'd like to see it before it's approved in Auburn anywhere, so whether it's East Auburn, South Auburn, West or North.
Do you want to look at all, let's say, use your analogy, 100 examples and actually priority rank each one of those? Do you want to wait till when do you think council should be involved? Is it the semifinal after the initial, stage? Is it after initial vetting process? What point do you think the final approval, or not a final, or even preliminary approval needs to be granted?
Well, I think we gotta be in the middle somewheres, for sure. Because, you know, I don't wanna say something out of school here, but it's like, our area might like something a little better than the other area likes, or differently than the other area. And maybe you three on that side would rather see it in East Auburn, I'd rather see it in South Auburn. So I think we should know where something is headed before it gets there, before people vote that this is where we want it.
It's like a semi, you know, after the initial vetting, there's, you know, comes down to whatever the case is, 3, 4, half dozen the other.
Yeah, because we had
semi.
talked about, and we had adjusted the plan to make sure that we included the counselor in the ward, but that's pending that we picked a location so we can identify what counselor that is. So if that's not identified, that would be, that's a good discussion.
Yeah, well, you know, I think, again, the lessons learned in this grant process, Counselor, were taken into consideration around that. We brought 2 for each location.
Yeah, and we
grant.
approved both of them, that's right.
We learned that the more staff input we have on the committee, we did convene the Public Works folks around both finalists to talk about location and complications. But I think that you'll see on a lot of communities, many more staff people are involved in the committee. So there's kind of natural conversation there. There are certainly there are communities that have plans for plans. You know, they have a master plan for where public art should be. Lots of residential, neighborhood-based conversations leading up to those plans. We're not proposing that. That's a pretty significant undertaking to put one together, but I think that would probably, Councilor Walker, lead into your comment that neighborhoods have identities, and identities can be demonstrated through public art. So, I mean, long-term, I think that would be a great way to go about it, that the community starts to identify the kinds of things. Is it sculpture? Is it, you know, is it a water? What is it? And then I think you'll see in a lot of communities, the public works planning and hydrants, I mean, not just utilitarian things, but bridge overpass, lots of things get incorporated long-term. So the communities that do this the best really are the most integrated in their planning and thinking. And then by the time the votes come, so many more people have been involved that it doesn't feel like there's ever a surprise. Which, you know, as I said, goes back to kind of the general planning for a community, that we don't want to see a road through a neighborhood at the last minute. You want to know it's coming.
Sure, sure. Is there any other ideas that Becky can bring, and Sabrina can bring back? I mean, at the end of the day, the plan and the work group and whatnot all has to come back to council for approval, of course. But this is a good step to get your ideas out there.
Of where we'd like to see a project or what we would like to have done? Is that what you're asking?
No, with the makeup and the organization
Oh,
of the
okay.
work group itself and not project specific. There is a list of potential projects up. This is the current work group was a temporary work group, 3-year work group until the funds ran out. So that's why now we're talking about having a permanent type of work group.
Because I've been asked if we could do something with the trestle over here, where it's starting to rust and stuff.
We've actually looked at that. Sabrina took, with the art group about a year ago, I think. I think like all great ideas, COVID kind of derailed, that's a pun? Thanks, that's my one of the night. Derailed that conversation, but you did actually have not a presentation, but an example of what some art on that trestle would
Little
look like.
research on it to figure out cost and logistical issues or
I think the art work group, though, is bi-directional in nature just by its design, right? If people are bringing ideas out to the work group for vetting and looking at, and it's coming back to the council, and vice versa, regular folks are bringing them into the work group. So it is bi-directional, but it also helps act as a clearinghouse between staff and residents.
So I really like the idea of having that on our website, allowing input from the public to say, hey, this is a really great place for some art, and then that way we at least have an idea, because we might not drive everywhere. There could be art. And I think for part of the direction, I would like to see whatever the makeup of the group is, find all of our public land and start piecing together where we can have art in, you know, our parks and all of the other places we have. So that way, if something comes along, we have 5 or 6 locations already and say, hey, you know, this would really fit right here. And it kind of takes away some of that having to find a home for art if we already have empty homes waiting for art to come over the next 10, 20 years.
Okay. Any other final ideas? None? I think that's great. Becky, do you have anything? Sabrina?
No, I mean, just to recap, the process would be that if LA Arts can move forward, we would be putting together a series of conversations with staff and gathering a lot of data and then crafting something to bring back to council, hoping for a couple of workshop opportunities to get as much feedback as we possibly can.
Yep, perfect. Sabrina, good?
I'm good.
Awesome. Look forward to seeing you in just a week or two, 2 weeks for the fish. Have we named the fish?
No, do you want to name the fish?
I think it should. Yeah, I do actually. It should have 6 letters. Start with an L, end with an OI.
Sabrina, don't ask questions you don't want answers to. So.
Fish. I think it would.
Beautiful.
We got one vote right there. It's a beautiful name. Not to assume that it's male fish. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leroy the fish.
Just for clarification, we have $50,000 set aside in our building budget for art for the high school. So
Even close to 1%.
1% up to $50,000.
Wait, Eric.
So Martin. Mr. Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. It has been quite a year, and we got our numbers back for the end of the year at the end of June for permits, and these are the numbers that people declare on their permits. We know that they're underestimated in a lot of cases. We have in the past had a target of $40 million as a good year.
Can you scroll that up to your worksheet?
In the past, we've had a target of $40 million for a good year as far as declared permit value. This year, we hit $59.4 million. So our best year ever was FY 2019 in the past at $46.9 million. This year was about $13 million over that. Just shy of $60 million. We knew at the beginning of June that we were set up to have a record, but really didn't know until we got near the end of June exactly how much of a record it was. We had some really large permits pending during the month of June. From a workload perspective, I think that underestimates what staff has had this year because we've not included the permit review for the high school. So if we did, and I don't think it's fair to do that as a measure comparing this year to other years, staff has reviewed over $169 million worth of permits this year. So more than triple our best year. I think that's a good reassurance that the work that the council's doing, along with the planning board and staff, trying to streamline our ordinances, trying to, the work you're doing with permit fees, just encourage people to build here instead of other places. It's a great reassurance that that's working, or at least helping, and a number of other forces in play that we can't identify exactly why this year was so much better than others. But the trend for the coming year looks very positive. We're talking about a number of large projects. I think there's a good chance that we could still set a new record in FY 22 based on the wind that's sort of in our sails right now. The positive press around the state about what's happening in Auburn. And we're also talking about some articles coming out specifically related to real estate that are really focused on Auburn and working with Jay Brenchick, our Economic Development Director. So wanted to share these numbers with you. You can see the last 9 years. The top row is the number of permits. The second row is the estimated cost of construction. And the third is the permit fees collected. More than double last year's permit fees collected. On average, we had more projects, substantially more projects, but we also had larger projects on average, which generate a larger permit fee.
Was the high school fees stripped out of that, or is that inclusive?
The high school fees were waived 100%.
They're, okay, so
Yeah,
that
so they're
333, that's without high
That's
school.
not in there. Those are actual revenues collected. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, pin it. What's the number for 22?
22.
Just put the stake in the ground right now, Eric.
71 million.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
I'll take the over.
Take the over. We'll have squares for sale by next meeting.
Was,
1 million it is, okay.
was this, because your number of permits isn't a whole lot different from the last 4 years. You had mentioned there was larger projects is what it looks like.
So on average, yeah, to get that much more of a permit fee out of, a relatively small increase in the total number of permits, the projects were on average larger.
Was there a large number of larger projects, or was it many of the same and a handful of bigger ones?
Yeah, there's always a handful of bigger ones that really drive those numbers as far as value. There was Evergreen Subaru was a substantial one, major expansion. Future Guard was a major expansion, over 100,000 square feet in that permit year. Still under construction, but permitted during that permit year. And another big one that was approved right at the end of the year was Target. That's a major renovation. That building will look brand new when it's done. So
There are people there working on it now, actually, I noticed late last week.
yeah, so few really large ones and a lot of, on average, larger than average ones for the year.
Nice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wonderful work. Thank you and your department. How much of a monkey wrench in the fees that you've collected for the permits will there be, since we've changing the fees and eliminating some fees?
It would, if we had the same permit, same set of permits for the year, it'll certainly be less. We've run some of the numbers. I don't remember exactly where the final fees were going to fall, but I think the residential was down 50 or 60%, something like that. And commercial, I don't recall exactly what the final number was, but that's a policy decision on the part of the council.
I don't think, I don't think commercial would actually, in the proposed fees, would be affected because we already addressed that in a policy issue to match it up with state minimums like 5 or 6 months ago, if memory serves me. Correct, Brian?
Yeah, correct. So, so on the commercial side, a lot of it was really streamlining and finding middle grounds and averages. So I don't think you would see as large of a impact in that space. I think a lot of the elimination really was on the residential side.
What percent of the 333 is residential versus commercial?
Yeah, we can pull those numbers. I don't have
Ballpark.
those here tonight. I'd really have to pull 2 separate reports to tell you that. I can get those numbers, though.
Any other questions for Eric or staff? I mean, this is great. I'm ready for the next slide to have unicorns and rainbows. But this is a really, I think people should key in on this one. This is a substantial increase, obviously fiscal year 20, in the heights of the pandemic with everything stopped. But that rebound during the last year is just, it's amazing. I can't gush enough about this. I think everybody in Auburn needs to realize the massive amount of growth that's been going on.
And it really shows a trend other than that 1 year, fiscal year 20, that was off.
I think this will also translate to, the question is when, to an increased valuation, especially on the commercial side, which will lead to a decrease in overall tax rates, mill rates to the residences and the businesses. So that's always a bit of catch up, I would suppose. So it takes some time for all that to be realized. Anything else? If not, thank you, Eric, very much. This is phenomenal. Great job. We can understand why you guys keep saying you're busy. So makes sense now. Next on the agenda, we have an executive session with possible action to follow during the meeting. It would be the last item under new business. This is pursuant to 1 MRSA, section 405-6C. Do I have a motion?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Carrier, a second by Councilor Gary. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being unanimous. For those of you watching, we will stand in executive session. We have 2 of them. We will reconvene at 7 o'clock for our normal scheduled meeting. Thank you.
Eric, could you
Good evening, folks. I'd like to open up, excuse me, the City Council meeting for July 19th, 2021. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we have one item on the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So
Mr.
moved.
Mayor, I object.
Yes.
I'd like it taken
Councilor
off.
Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like it taken off the consent agenda.
Will you talk into the mic, please?
I would like it taken off, I did. I would like it taken off the consent agenda, please.
Sue, just clarification. Any counselor, only takes one counselor to remove something off the consent agenda?
I would give a second.
Do I have a second on that? No second? It stays on the consent, agenda item? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for Councilor Carey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Walker. Vote, show of hands. All those in favor?
Roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote starts with Councilor Zani, who, by the way, I meant to say earlier, is excused tonight. She's on vacation.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes?
Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Counselor Boss.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
No.
Order passes by a vote of 6-1.
5-1.
I'm sorry, 5-1. Next are the minutes of the June 21st, 2021 regular city council meeting. Any corrections? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the June 21 regular city council meeting at this time.
Motion to accept.
Second.
We got a motion for Councilor Walker, second for Councilor Carrier. All those in favor? Opposed? None being, passes by a vote of 5-1. Next, we're going to go on to communications, presentations, and recognition. Does any counselor have any communications for the community at large? None being, Mr. Manager?
Nothing.
Okay. We're going to move on to the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to step up, please step up to the podium, state your name and address, and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Okay, we're going to move on. There's no one here tonight from the public that'd like to speak. Going to go on to unfinished business. Next is Ordinance 25-06212021, amending Chapter 60, Article 4 of the Auburn Code of Ordinances to strike Division A multifamily urban zoning districts. Public hearing and second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion for Councilor Carey, second from Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public. Does anybody in the public like to speak on this? No? I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any comment, debate, discussion, or questions? None being, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes?
Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Counselor Boss.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
Yes.
Order passes by a vote of 6-0. Next is Ordinance 26-0621-2021, amending Chapter 60, Article 4, Division 13, Section 60-525B of the Auburn Code of Ordinances to add automobile and marine sales lots and sales and service agencies to the list of special exemption uses in the Minot Avenue General Business 2 zoning district. This is a public hearing and its second reading. Do I have a motion?
Motion to move.
Motion for Councilor Walker. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second for Councilor Milks.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer an amendment.
Councilor McLeod, would like to offer an amendment to this before the public hearing? Absolutely. Can I have that amendment, please?
Do I need a second, or?
What is the amendment?
Oh, sorry, the amendment is to strike the language there and have it read automobile and marine sales lots and sales and service agencies, provided that vehicle display spaces are limited to not more than 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross building area, permanently constructed on the site with a maximum of 100 display spaces.
I have a motion on the floor to amend.
Second?
A second from Councilor Milks. I'll open this up for public comment. Public, is there any comment, discussion? None being. Council, bring this up to debate. We're still on the motion to amend at this point. We'll vote on that, then we'll vote on the overall ordinance. So, comment, clarification, Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not support the amendment because it will open the door to have by far more cars on the lot and turn Minot Avenue into a center street, which the founders of the Minot Avenue corridor did not want a big car lots from one end to the other.
Mr. Cousins, could you just approach the table if you could, just so there's some questions that are going to come out for clarification. But if I could clarify Counselor Gary's remark, you have an idea on the average car dealership size on Center Street or even Evergreen Subaru that's going in? What is their average lot size?
I don't know the number of display spaces, but they are substantially more than the maximum of 100 spaces that's being talked about. I think the goal of the original Minot Ave group was to not have large display lots without the investment structures that the tax revenues. I think that this amendment, based on feedback we've heard from the public as well, is a way to try to balance that and require the investment in buildings as part of the development of the car lot, and also not to end up with a really large over 100 space car, even if they build large buildings.
So it's capped, this amendment to this motion, or order rather, would cap it at 100 display spaces, but also tie it into square footage on a permanently built structure. Got it. Is there any other opposition, comments on this? Motion to amend? Opposition? Any
Just a,
support?
excuse me, clarification, and I had discussed this before. It's important that we make sure that it's usable vehicles, and I don't know how we would do that with current regulation and planning board. I don't want a situation where we have 95 derelict vehicles out there that we're working on. If we're going to do this, I guess,
Yeah.
some kind of a guarantee that there are no derelicts out there. Minot Avenue has stayed fairly decent with car shops not having derelict vehicles out, much more than you would say off of Poland Road or even Washington Avenue.
Or South
there-
Main Street.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some spaces on South Main Street that have 60 or 70 cars that are derelict or in various stages of
Is
operation.
there any, and I don't remember,
I mean,
and I was gonna
Inspectable,
ask-
cars that could pass inspection, some sort of a language that would.
I couldn't remember if there was anything in the planning board as far as,
Well, if we could, if we're on the clarification, let's bring it back to this motion. If we need to further amend the motion to state that those are 100 serviceable or inspectable cars or vehicles or cars, then I think we can make a secondary motion to amend. If there's nothing already, Eric, in our code of ordinances that govern the amount of running versus non-running vehicles.
Yeah, the definition of a junkyard, both in our ordinance and state law, would require a junkyard license if there are more than 3 inoperable or uninspectable vehicles.
Then we're good. Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Mayor. So we do have a citizen that was part of the earlier discussions regarding this. He did come in. I just want to make sure he hears the amended motion and maybe give an opportunity to speak.
Okay, very good. So what we're doing, members of the public that just joined, we have the motion on the floor right now. We also have a motion to amend it to state automobile and marine sales lots and sales and service agencies, provided that vehicle display spaces are limited to not more than 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross building area permanently constructed on the site with a maximum of 100 display spaces. Easy terms, if you had a 6,000 square foot showroom, garage, car detailing, butcher shop, that 6,000 square feet total space would allow 60 display spaces for vehicles for sale. Okay. Now, at this point, is there any more comment from the council on the motion to amend? What I'd like to do is I'd like to have a vote on that motion to amend, bring it back up to the floor, at which time we'll have public comment, because we haven't had that yet, and then any other motions to amend. All those in favor of the motion to amend as presented by Counselor McLeod? All those, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, excuse me, 4. Opposed? 2. The motion to amend passes by a vote of 4 to 2. So now we're going to bring this language back to the general body. I'll open this up to public comment at this time. If there's anybody in the public that would like to speak on this amended motion on the second reading, please step up to the podium, state your name, and limit your comments to 3 minutes if you could. Yeah, oh, Mr. Yulin, excuse me, if you could, yeah, just use a podium, because it has a microphone. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm Dave Rich.
Rich, I'm sorry.
I am looking to put a small used, I had a larger used car lot over in Lewiston for 32 years, so I'm looking to put a small, I've semi-retired, I'm looking for a smaller place. So I'm a little confused, and I did walk in a little late, and I apologize for that. Where my confusion is on the service, the non-stickered vehicles versus stickered, because when you buy a vehicle, it's easy, if I have 10 or 15 cars, 5 of those are in for service, they're not stickered yet. So I'm not sure I understood the 3-car thing that was just
It was about
discussed.
5 cars, and Eric can clarify on the reality of that, if you could, please.
Yeah, operable vehicles, serviceable operable vehicles would not count towards that 3 if they start, run, drive.
Okay.
Regardless of the sticker.
Not necessarily stickered yet, but just,
Operable, yeah.
yeah, in the process
inoperable
of being
or
stickered is
unexpected.
operable, yeah, okay. Yeah, so, and again, if I want 10 cars and I have 1,000 square feet, I'm all set,
Yep.
right? I think I
Yes, sir.
heard that?
That is how it's reading right now, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We're back on the main motion. No other public comment? I'm going to bring this back to the council. Anybody want to speak in opposition to this motion? Anybody want to speak in support of this motion? Anybody have any further questions to staff? If not, I'm going to bring this to a vote. Madam
Roll
Clerk-
call vote, please.
Say again?
Roll call vote, please.
Of course, it's an ordinance. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes?
Counselor Carrier,
Aye.
Counselor Walker,
Aye.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
No.
Order passes, second reading, 5-1. Next is ordinance 27-06212021, amending section 60-201A to allow the 2-family dwellings in the low-density country residential zoning district. Public hearing and second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Counselor Carey, second from Counselor Walker. Let's open this up to the public for a hearing. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak tonight? None being? Bring it back to the council. Council, any statements in opposition to this order? Any comments in support of this order?
I think it's great that we're moving forward with this. It's going to work great for our city.
And just a point of clarification for folks, if you're watching what's happening at the State House, and Mr. Cousins and I had a conversation about this, there has been a state law that was passed and signed into law by the governor, though it has not been enacted yet, authorizing secondary dwelling units on all residential lots, regardless of municipality. Just so you know that I advocated at the Maine Municipal Association level against this overreach, we thought, from state law, but it still hasn't been fully funded through appropriations, Eric. So it's now sitting there and maybe enactment come next year. Though that could be, it's a little flexible, but just so you know, this taking effect now isn't contradicting or a moot point based upon state law. We'd still be doing this ahead of the state enactment. Eric, do you have anything else? I might have
That
messed
sums
on
up the opinion that we received from MMA.
So,
Okay.
It really sets us ahead in allowing it in many places before.
so the state, in essence, is dictating our local zoning.
Yes. They did this with small homes as well. Things that we've already been well progressive on and moving because it's right for Auburn. But again, Yeah. We thought it was, and the MMA, just so you all know, really took a strong stance regardless of really the issue. If it was an overstep, and they thought an encroachment of home rule and superseding the municipal reach, if you would, or power. So no other comments? No? Okay. I will ask for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor McLeod?
Yes.
Counselor Milks?
Yes.
Counselor Carrier?
Aye.
Counselor Walker?
Aye.
Counselor Boss?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Order passes, vote is 6-0. Next, ordinance 28-06212021, amending chapter 60, article 5, section 60-608 to remove minimum off-street parking requirements for all land uses except residential public hearing and, except residential. This is a public hearing and second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Counselor Carrier, second from Counselor Boss. I'll open this up to the public to speak. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this order? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, do we have any statements in opposition to this order?
Mr. Mayor, I have two motions to amend.
We'll
I'll
take
start
them in
with
turn,
one.
please.
Pardon?
We should take them.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The first one is to unstrike the very bottom of the second page, if that's necessary, where it talks about applying to elderly housing as constructed under special state, local, federal guidelines.
Oh, keep going.
Restricting occupancy for elderly persons. That definition is still used further up on the first page, so I just think it's an oversight. I don't know if we need a motion for it or not.
It's kind of a clerical. Well, I mean, I don't think it was never done intentionally
Right.
by council, in other words. It was stricken, but it shouldn't be. Do we need a motion to amend this at this point?
The clerical,
Yeah.
we'll just put it in the, well, this will be the final reading, so it
Yeah,
should
we
be
did.
added.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Right
Second
there.
from Counselor Boss. Let's bring it up here real quick. Yeah.
Eric, do you have any feedback on that, or you?
It doesn't hurt to keep it if we're keeping the standards for housing. That's fine. It's a slightly reduced standard for elderly housing as opposed to general housing, general population.
Did that come out of planning board at all?
I don't believe it was specifically discussed, but I couldn't say for sure. It wasn't part of the staff report that Megan reported back as part of the discussion.
Very good. So we have a motion on the floor to amend this and unstriking the stricken language, which would keep in turn the elderly parking requirements for all elderly housing that's built with either local, state, or federal monies. We have a second for Counselor Boss. Any comment on that before I bring this to a vote? None? All those in favor of the amendment to the motion, please raise your hand. Opposed? None being, so we'll unstrike that. That motion to amend is approved. Counselor McLeod, you had another motion to amend?
I did, sir. The second amendment I would like to propose is combining single-family, farm, multifamily, and two-family into one line and have it be, read one space per dwelling unit, and leaving elderly at 1/2.
I have a motion to amend on residential, going from 1.5 to 1. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second from Counselor Milks. Any comment on this motion to amend?
To clarify, that would also go from 2 per dwelling unit to 1 on the first line as well.
I'm sorry, thank you. Thank you. No comment? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion to amend passes by a vote of 5-1. Okay, we're back to the main motion at this time. Is there any comment supporting this second reading? Or, excuse me, supporting this order? Any comments on opposition? None being, I'll ask the clerk for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor McLeod?
Yes.
Counselor Milks?
Yes.
Counselor Carrier?
Aye.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Boss?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
No.
Order passes by a vote of 5-1. Next is Order 29-06212021, amending Chapter 60, Article 4, Division 14, Section 60, to remove all parking requirements except for residential in the form-based code zoning districts. Public hearing and second reading. Do I have a motion?
So be.
Second.
Councilor Walker, and I get a second from Councilor McLeod. Anybody in the public like to speak on this? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, as a refresher, I believe, in order for it to be consistent with the previous motion, will amendments have to be made, Mr. Cousins? I'm not sure how prescriptive form-based coding was with regards to parking, or if there was even a difference from what was amended. One space.
Yeah, I don't see the differentiation here between regular units versus elderly.
So we have conformity?
Double check the notes at the end.
Well, Mr. Cousins is looking for some conformity with the previous order. Do I have any counselors that would like to speak in opposition to this? Any counselors like to speak in support of this? I'll ask for a roll call vote in just a moment then.
We don't differentiate here between a multifamily, single family, or a unit that's dedicated to elderly.
Very good. Madam Clerk?
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes?
Counselor Carrier,
Aye.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
No.
Order passes by a vote of 5-1. Next is Ordinance 30-06212021, amending the Conservation Open Space Form-Based Code District by adding a purpose statement. Public hearing and second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Councilor Carrier, second by Councilor Walker. Anybody in the public like to speak on this? None being. I'll open this up to council. Council, this is something we discussed in a workshop previous meeting ago. Went through the planning board process and they approved. Mr. Cousins, do you have anything to add on that?
Nothing to add since first reading.
Okay, very good. I'd like to ask for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes?
Counselor Carrier,
Aye.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 6-0, first reading.
Sure.
Or, excuse me. New business. Ordinance 31-07192021, amending the low-density country residential and rural residential strips abutting the agricultural resource protection zone from the current depth of 450 feet from center line of the roadway to a depth of 750 feet from the center line of the roadway, or the rear property boundary, whichever is less. This is a public hearing and a first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Councilor Carrier, second from Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public. Anybody in the public like to speak on this? None being, I'll bring this back to the council. Council, is there any opposition? Anybody in opposition that'd like to speak on this? Councilor Boss.
Yeah, a comment. During the comprehensive planning process and in our draft language that we've written, we have acknowledged that the ag zone has, some issues that we'd like to attend to in the future and that it warrants a larger, broader conversation. I'm not in favor of supporting this ordinance change at this time until we're able to have that more broad strategic conversation about what to do with the ag zone. I think it's a perfectly legitimate conversation to be having, but I think it should wait until we have that broader view.
Anybody in support, any further opposition to this? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the good Councilor Boss in her position.
Any comments in support? Councilor Walker?
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a bit, and we've talked with a lot of people. A lot of people are confused about the strip zone, and we're extending it, and we're doing this, and we're doing that. We're not extending anything. The strip zone is there. All we're doing is trying to make it deeper, more capability for people if they want to build a second home or add a second piece to their property, whether it's a home or maybe they're building their two-car garage. But I think the opportunity to be able to do this, it was taken away a long time ago
I read some of their reasoning for it. I don't believe there's a better reason to take it away than we have for putting it there. And that's allow people to be able to use their land and use more of it if they can extend to the 750 feet.
Any other further comments supportive? If not, I'd like to ask Mr. Cousins, could we put up on the screen, or Brian? There are several examples of zoning, and I just want to bring you some information, council, that you can think about now and on the second reading. Looking at every lot within the strip, and I actually brought this to planning board last week, which, by the way, had a unanimous approval on this concept. Notice that there is a lot of non-conforming homes that were situated in the agricultural zone that weren't before, and hence because of the movement historically down to 450, they're now non-conforming. Maple Hill Road is a great example of that, as there are multiple houses along Maple Hill Road between 45 and 65, I believe, so the lower half of that, that present a problem. Also noticed during the investigation or due diligence factor that there are several areas in Auburn which are currently still at the 750-foot strip that are highly residential, or as residential as the 450 strip. So in other words, we're seeing some inconsistencies, namely on Hotel Road as well as Perkins Ridge Road. There are some, and we can leave that up right now, real quick, Eric. Oh, we can move it.
I just tried opening the files that opened fine a couple of hours ago, and it's saying there's an error in reading the PDFs, but I can pull up the GIS and zoom in on any.
Yeah, if you can, that'd be great. Yeah, that might just be easier. What we did was, and I wish I had it open too, but I'm a Mac guy. Maybe that was it. I sent to you by Mac. There are some inconsistencies, or again, like from 450 to 700. There's also some hygiene, and this is what I spoke to the planning board about. There's a lot of hygiene that's needed within Auburn. As we go through North Auburn, and I can verbally give this to you without you looking at the map. North Auburn, right around Route 4, close to the Turner line, there are a lot of lots there that actually have 2 or 3 zones within the lot, and it's a hodgepodge of varying depths and degrees. And I think after time that there needs to be a cleaning up of this for a couple reasons. When we can start cleaning up the zones, we make things simpler for individuals, especially landowners. I compared this with a list from the LA Metro Chamber of Commerce of active farms within Auburn that they provided to me. I did not find any conflict with the stated or the inventoried active farms within Auburn and these residential strips. So there is no conflict there. Most of this is quote-unquote agricultural land, but on a personal level, it's called the backyard. It does give us a false positive on the total amount of land that we have for agriculture and resource protection. That is a backyard. So it kind of gives us that false positive, if you would. Cleaning this up a little bit will give us a little bit of a better feel on what truly is agriculture and resource protection zone. I think to Councilor Boss's comment earlier, there are some issues with it, and they need to be addressed. But as Planning Board member Dana Staples said during his comments before his positive approval of this, was that this is an incremental step that will do no harm, that will only help clean this up for the eventual conversation, paraphrasing on that one. So you can see the strips there outlined. As we kind of zoom in, if you could zoom into Summer, North Auburn, Perkins Ridge. I'll give you some kind of visual examples of this. North.
Perkins Ridge is
There we
here,
go.
West Auburn Road here.
You can see some of the differences there, whereas the strips are still maintained at 750 feet versus 450. And if you scroll down a little bit on Summer Street, Hotel, you can see that this strip I measured earlier, right there, Eric, thank you, right where your cursor is. Agricultural resources off to the right. That residential strip is 750 feet from the center line. So there's a lot of holdovers, and I think if anyone started asking what the rationale was between having a 750-foot strips and then arbitrarily 450-foot strips, that might be a hard one to discuss and dispute. So again, I want to bring this all up to council for you to make your decision the fact that there are some inaccuracies, and there's stuff that's within our council's power, and the planning board recognized that, to fix now, without causing any damage to any potential agricultural operation or current agricultural operation. Cleans things up a little bit. If you look down, if you could go to Garfield, I believe. Yeah, right, Nora, a little left. There are some just idiosyncrasies there that I think the judgment call of staff between the next 2 weeks is going to come into play. If you look up at Garfield a little bit more to the north, you'll see how, I believe it's Garfield, just juts out. The ends of these zones are not very clear. There's a little rhyme and reason that don't make sense. North around Taylor Pond. Would be corner of Hatch. Yeah, that one right there, I think that was, yeah, that's off Garfield. If you look down, if you actually had overlaid to the left, further south, right on the end, that strip is actually just a small triangle of residential, LDCR, that juts into the ag just to capture a house, for no other reason but to capture a house. And we have to ask ourselves where all this is coming from, what land was moved, how do we clean this up? So, long and short is this. I think if we have, we pass this on the first reading tonight, there's still a second reading to say no, but it allows staff to go ahead, make the investment of time and money into mapping out what the true numbers will be and what the map will look like, applying some good hygiene, applying some good common sense before we make our second and final vote. Does that make sense? I kind of wanted to give you that brief overview because it's something that I think a lot of people have spent a lot of time on so far, but more time's needed. So that's one example. If you look through it on the GIS system, there's literally dozens of examples that I found throughout Auburn. You go to 50 Maple.
So, Mr. Mayor, before the second reading, we would have an actual map of impacted, or manager?
Yeah, so Eric has reached out to a consultant to see what that would look like for us. We're not sure if it would be at necessarily the next meeting. We're pretty certain it won't be, but it will be coming up for a second reading. And once we have that information back from the consultant, and we're anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 to outsource that. And we have funding that's allocated for our consulting, so we would utilize that as long as it's council to actually see that mapped before you do the second reading. Eric, anything to add on that?
No, just it would be relatively simple to map 750 feet deep on every one of these strips, but when we're narrowing it to the back property lines, it actually takes a person to look at every one of those lines and adjust the boundary to match so we can accurately capture it for the council to agree on what's being approved, but also to map the acreage.
So are there any other comments or questions for staff or debate on this? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not opposed of the 750 feet per se in order for a person to put a mother-in-law place on their property. What I'm against is the terminology strip zoning because of how it affects. Because whether I have a piece of property that I want it or my neighbors are, because they're part of the strip, they fall in that category, instead of it being based on a case-by-case basis on what a person would like to do on their property. And that's why I would like to see the Ag Committee to look at this and see how we can come to better terminology and terms with this.
I mean, it's a strip, it's a strip. There might be a different word to use, but at the end of the day, it's an arbitrary line drawn for arbitrary reasons that creates winners and losers, depending on which side of the road you live on or which side of the land mass you live on. Any other comments on this before I ask for a roll call vote? None being. Madam Clerk?
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Counselor Carrier.
Aye.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Counselor Boss.
No.
Counselor Gary.
No.
Order passes by a vote of 4-2. Next is Order 32-07192021, amending the zoning of the property located at 41 Stevens Mills Road. That's parcel ID 208-043. From suburban residential to general business 2, this is a public hearing and a first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Councilor McLeod, second for Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public. Anybody from the public like to speak? None being. We're going to bring this back to the council. Council, and before I do that, just to refresh your memory, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cousins if he's okay with that. It's got up on the screen now, just to give the quick description.
You can see the location here on the screen. It's at the corner of Court Street and Stevens Mills Road. The red color to the western side of the image and the southern and eastern sides, that's all general business 2 zoning. You can see that the last corner at this intersection to remain in residential zone is the parcel outlined in the dotted orange line, 41 Stevens Mills Road. Staff had talked with the previous owner, as well as the current owner and the new potential buyer. Over the years, this made a lot of sense to make this adjustment rather than having one residential corner at this fairly high-traffic intersection. Planning board supported it. The current comp plan shows a boundary similar to what you see here, but makes it clear that the boundaries are not a zoning map. They're just the general land use character, and the council has to decide where those boundaries actually fall in creating a zoning map. The updated comp plan draft recommends a few of these corners, sort of the holdout corners at largely commercial areas, to be changed to commercial. And we see this as an opportunity to attract a business that we'd really like to retain in Auburn and see it grow. And then you can take a look at the larger area once the comp plan is updated.
Good, thank you. Is there any questions of Mr. Cousins at this time? Councilor Carrier?
I guess my question would be to design, and will the planning board be addressing the curb cuts for those? I mean, the building is gone now, but where that sits at a fairly busy intersection, and the driveway across the way on Court Street is Dairy Queen.
Depending on the size of the development, I think it's very likely that it'll come in at less than 5,000 square feet, so it may be a staff level review. But we do have driveway spacing requirements that would encourage that to be located as far from Stevens Mill Road as possible, and we could try to get it as lined up as we can with the one across the street. That makes good traffic sense.
Eric, can you just pull your mic right into you? We got people saying they can't hear you very well.
Sorry, yeah, we will look at that. I think there's a good chance that it will be a staff level review rather than planning board, as long as it stays under 5,000 square feet. But we'll look at making sure that it's spaced safely from Stevens Mill, and that may push it even closer to lining up with the Dairy Queen driveway.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I'm in favor of this corner being changed to something that could be built there other than just an apartment house or a single-family home. But I'm curious, has anyone talked with the people right around the area to see if they feel the same as where we're headed here, or are they against it?
So I've talked with one property owner. I've actually been somewhat surprised that we haven't heard from others. We did send a mailed notice to property owners within 500 feet for the planning board hearing, as well as tonight. So there hasn't been opposition presented to us.
Thank you.
And they have the 25 signatures, if I remember correctly, on the affidavit, so they do have some support there. Any opposition to this? Any support? Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Counselor McLeod?
Yes.
Counselor Milks?
Yes?
Counselor Carrier?
Aye.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Boss?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Next is ordinance 33-07192021, amending Chapter 60, Article 12, Division 5, Section 60992B of the Auburn Code of Ordinances and Shoreland zoning map to allow as a special condition overlay in identified areas of the shoreland zone the height of all principal or accessory structures to exceed the 35-foot flood height limit to a maximum of 50 feet. This is a public hearing and first reading.
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion from Counselor Walker, second from Counselor Carrier. Anybody in the public like to speak on this? Nobody? At this point, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, anybody would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Is there anybody that would like to speak in support of this?
I just have one question. This brings us into compliance now? This is the order for that?
So this expands the allowable building height to 50 feet.
Which maxes are allowable within the form-based code district there, correct?
Very similar. The form-based code is a maximum number of stories, but the stories add up to about that same 50-foot height.
Very good. Again, this is a unanimous approval on planning board.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? None being, Madam Clerk, roll call
Counselor
vote.
McLeod?
Yes.
Counselor Milks?
Yes.
Counselor Carrier?
Aye.
Counselor Walker?
Yes.
Counselor Boss?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
6-0, it passes. Next is Order 75-0719-2021, allocating $250,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act funds towards a city match of Efficiency Maine residential grants for qualifying purchases, upgrades in accordance with their published residential programs as of July 8th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Walker, second from Councilor Carrier. Open this up to the public for comment. Any comment? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, do you have any questions about this? This is, we had a workshop on this last month. There's been some information that came from the Maine Municipal Association identifying this as a great example of a good project up for consideration. Based upon all those facts, we wanted to bring it as an order. And I want to thank the councilors who brought this forth in order to push it through again. This is Councilor Milks and Councilor McLeod brought this forth in order to get your support or not support. Any opposition to this?
Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment to
Yes.
add. Right after where it says July 8th, 2021, in parentheses, I wanted to put excluding electric vehicles and LED bulbs, end parenthesis.
I have a motion on the floor to add the following language excluding electric vehicles and LED bulbs. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Councilor Milks, a second. Any conversation on this?
I'm just wanting to add this because on the residential page for Energy Maine, it does list electric cars, and that's not really what we're trying to get at here. And LED bulbs are already discounted at the retailers, so they're already, we don't want to double dip on that as well. It would make it very difficult to ascertain.
Understandable. I'd like to ask for a vote on the motion to amend. All those in favor on the amendment? Opposed? None being. Motion stands amended. Would anybody like to speak in opposition to this? No? Anybody like to speak in support of this?
I just have a clarifying question for, can we list the census tracts that are eligible for this program? It just says identified census tracts, but for clarity for the public, can we add the actual numbers?
In the order, is that where you would like to add it?
Yeah.
So I don't have those census tract numbers. Brian, I'm not sure if you can pull it up real quick for us.
Yes, I'll pull this up right now.
Just, by default, if we need to make a motion to amend, that's a great point, Councilor Boss. But by default, they have to be used in the low to moderate income census tracts in Auburn, our downtown. Obviously, those 3 census tracts. Another census, two
Just
downtown.
Yep.
While that's being looked at, I'll also speak in favor of hoping that some of these funds can also be used outside of those census tracts as our guidance for the ARPA money comes down as well to help, everyone in our city.
While Brian's looking that up, the Treasury Department continues to provide more guidance. As we continue to kind of wade through that, we'll certainly bring that, and this would allow for that to happen.
I will say, for those of you watching that might not have caught the workshop while we're pulling up the census tract numbers, this is our first utilization or authorization for ARPA money to be spent, and I honestly think it's a great way to really help those most vulnerable and those most affected by COVID-19, increase the quality of living, make their homes more efficient, make them safer, make them healthier, and really increase the value of some of our depressed housing stock in Auburn. For this amount of money, I hope that we're coming back here in 3 months because it's gone, and You know, the city manager says we need to allocate $500,000 because it's such a great program. Some real-life numbers here. If you're getting a $500 grant for a new heat boiler, mini split, electric heating system, we'll go ahead and double that to 1,000. Okay, so, you know, up to. So there's some really good programs here that can be taken advantage of. I hope most people do.
No, census tracts are 101 and 105.
Thank you.
Councilor Boss, do you want to make a motion to amend?
Sure, I'd like to make a
Okay.
motion to amend to include census tract, the number of census tract areas after the reference, 101 and 105.
We have a motion to amend, adding the census tract number 101 and 105 for clarity. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor of the amendment? The amendment to the motion passes. No further conversation. I will ask for a
Roll call.
roll call vote. I need to-
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes?
Counselor Carrier.
Aye.
Counselor Walker.
Aye.
Counselor Boss.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
Yes.
Order passes 6-0. Outstanding. Outstanding. Okay. We're adding this order. Like I said earlier, we had an executive session with action to follow. This is Order 76-07192021 to grant the city manager or designee the authority to execute the purchase and sale of the property at 526 Minot Avenue. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion for Councilor Walker, a second by Councilor Carrier. Any public input, discussion? Council, bring it back. Council, anything to say on this matter? None being? I will take a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None being? Passes 6-0. I'll open up the last open session of the night. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak about any business pertaining to the city that is not on tonight's agenda, please step to the podium, give us your name, address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And there is no one, so we're going to bring this back to the council. Reports, starting off with my report. Midsummer, we have a lot of activities going on outside of official city business. There are some meetings that are going on now, just follow-up one-on-ones with legislatures and community residents concerning issues, ordinances, and so forth that are coming forth. That's it on my end. Council, any reports? Start off to the left, Councilor Boss.
No, I have 2 upcoming meetings. Auburn Public Library Board of Trustees meets tomorrow morning at 7:30. The Agriculture Committee meets next Tuesday at 5:30 p.m., but otherwise I have nothing to report.
Okay.
I just have to report that the fundraising subcommittee of the building, the Edward Little High School Building Committee, is meeting, so we can continue to look for ways to leverage funds to pay for all the great things we have.
Councilor Milks.
The sewer trustees meeting is, and the water trustees meeting are this week. We are in person, Tuesday, 4 o'clock at the AWD, and Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Wednesday's for sewer?
AWSD. Wednesday is water.
Wednesday's water.
Tuesday is sewer. The AWSD building.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not exactly a council report, but it's something that happened within the city of Auburn. As a lot of people have heard that a vehicle was taken from Barker Mills parking lot. It happened over this weekend. It vanished between 10 o'clock Saturday night and 8 o'clock-ish Sunday morning. The vehicle belonged to a couple elderly tenants. One of them is the husband. He's got a pacemaker. He has heart trouble. He's got fluid retention because he's only got one kidney. And because his vehicle is gone, he now has no way when he comes back home from the hospital to be able to go to his appointments and things. The good police department, they worked due diligent to try to find the van, but in the process of finding it, I guess the one that stole it kind of evaded the police, and they found the vehicle pretty much abused and in total disrepair. and I'm going to be doing a fundraiser to help raise some funds so this family can get a vehicle. They're good people. I mean, I know there's a lot of good people in Auburn. He tries to do what he can for the community. I don't
Well,
know.
thank you.
it's-
Well, thank
it's-
you. Please, in your communications next meeting, let us know so we can publicize the fundraiser.
Appreciate that.
Counselor Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow, the Age Friendly is playing a movie at the Senior Center, Community Senior Center at Pettingill Park. Starts at 10, gets done just about noontime. Wednesday, the First Auburn Senior Citizens have a meeting that starts at 10 a.m. in the morning. You're welcome to come and try us out, see if you like it. Join 55 and over to join our group. Next Monday, I think the appointment for our boards is at 4 o'clock, correct, Sue? Yes. So next Monday, we should be appointing people to committees that they've asked to be on. I also have a meeting next Thursday, Neighborhood Watch meeting at the 6th Street Congregational Church, 6 o'clock. And I'm sorry, but next Tuesday, I also have a meeting at the United New Auburn at Rowley's Diner, 6 o'clock as well. That'll do it. Thank you.
Counselor Carrier, top that.
I can make it take longer. The airport board will be meeting this Saturday from 1 to 5 for strategic planning. If citizens would like to submit 2 short-term goals, 2 long-term goals, and 2 medium-term goals for the airport to consider as part of their strategic planning. As again, part of that meeting will also be Zoom if you can attend. If you didn't know, the former airport manager passed away. His funeral will be August 20th at the Forrest Smith National Cemetery in Arkansas. His wife has asked that anybody that would be considering sending flowers instead make a donation to the airport. Rick was very involved with it. As a matter of fact, the Civil Air Patrol last year had honored Rick for his work that he'd done with them over the years. So if anybody is interested in making a donation in his honor, to make it to the Auburn Lewiston Airport.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and that, our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Rick. He was a great airport manager. I got to know him quite well over the last 3 years. So, always difficult. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Just a few updates. One, staff has certainly been working hard on a few events that are coming up, one being National Night Out, which will be August 3rd at 5:30 p.m. at Festival Plaza. Really encourage the public to come, encourage all of you to come and be part of that event. It's always a great hit within our community. Also, August 21st will be our Bicentennial Parade. Staff has been working with the state for that project. The mayor's directly involved in that as well as part of the committee work, and that is coming together where I believe we'll have close to 200 floats or participants that will be in the parade. That's not counting all the people for each one of those. That's just 200 individual participants. So it should be a great turnout. I encourage you to come out for that as well. As Councilor Walker mentioned regarding Neighborhood Watch, the New Auburn one has started. The PD is starting up the other neighborhood watches. If you're not involved in a neighborhood watch, I encourage you to contact the PD to get involved and engaged in a local neighborhood watch group. The Communications Director, along with the city clerk, is putting out information regarding public information on how to run for public office to ensure that the public is well aware of that process. So that information, if it hasn't gone out, Sue, I believe it's going out this week regarding that. So people have a good, clear understanding of our ordinance, what's required to run for public office, the signatures. There was an article in the newspaper, but we want to make sure we're pushing that out as well. So that'll be going out very soon. And lastly, just so people can start planning, New Year's Auburn is being planned. So I know we're a few months out, but it takes a lot of work for that event, but planning is underway for a great turnout. Hopefully you all know when that date is.
What's the date? What's the date?
I knew you were going to ask this. So hopefully you all know when that date is.
Christmas is before New Year's, so
New Year, yes.
we're planning that one
So
too.
that is
I know
all
the
happening.
date. Christmas. Send a memo out reminding us what day Christmas is.
That's it, Mr. Mayor.
You sure?
Yes.
Oh, I've got a couple more. Okay, that is it for reports. I'm going to bring this back to executive session. Next on the agenda item, we have a personal matter pursuant to 1 MRSA, Section 405, 6A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Counselor Carrier and Counselor Milks on the second. All those in favor? Opposed? None being. I will state that we have another executive session after this on a personnel matter, separate. We will not have any action, so we will be off air as of right now. We now stay in executive session.